scorching wind or sun will strike them, because the one who shows them mercy will lead them. He will guide them beside springs of water. I will make all my mountains into a smooth road, and my highways will be raised up. Look, people will come from far away. Look, some will come from the north and the west, and some from the land of Sinim. Shout for joy, O heavens, and rejoice, O earth. Let mountains burst forth with shouts of joy, because the Lord is coming, comforting his people, and he is showing mercy to his afflicted ones.
Good. Okay. Verse 1 and also part of verse 5 is pretty important. Why?
Stronger people pay attention to him.
Yep.
What?
He's trying to get people to pay attention to him, sure. But think of a more modern application to these words.
God knew us when we were in the womb.
Hmm.
Formed us in the womb. We
What?
were people.
Oh,
And he had a plan for us.
we were people.
We were already people.
in
Yeah.
the womb.
Yeah.
Huh? What does that tell you about babies in the womb then?
That's
They're
murder
people.
when you abort one.
Yes.
Absolutely.
On a related note, this may be a bit of a painful question for some people. Has anyone here had a miscarriage before?
What?
Hmm.
Miscarriage.
Oh, no.
Mhm.
What does that say about the baby you miscarried?
Well,
If it's a
That it
person, what does it have the capacity for?
a soul.
If it has a soul, it can.
Go to heaven.
Absolutely. This is something that I've personally seen women struggle with a lot. What happened to the soul of my baby I miscarried? Well, were you in church? Then the baby heard the word. And if the baby heard the word, that's how faith is created. And there's no reason not to expect that baby to be in heaven any less than than an adult who's in church every Sunday.
Work of the Holy Spirit.
This is a question a lot of people have, a lot of women especially have, because miscarriages, well, sad, are not terribly uncommon. And on the other side, the pro-baby murder crowd likes to use abortion and likes to equate abortion and miscarriage. Two very different things. Well, miscarriage is called a spontaneous abortion. Yeah, it's the spontaneous part that makes it different. I figured I'd be preaching to the choir there, but I would also suspect you have people in your life who could handle having this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And this will give you some ammunition to use against them.
Thank you.
Is someone you need to talk to, Mike?
No, I talk to myself.
Oh,
No.
you were thanking yourself?
No.
Jeez, how arrogant are you?
Pretty arrogant. Pretty stupid, actually.
Well,
Pretty dull.
so someday you'll be as brilliant as I am.
I can only hope.
I love to tell some. Yeah.
I can only hope.
She is shot out of a cannon today. I respect it. Anyway, look at verse 2. That is some military imagery. Even the hiding in the shadow of his hand. What does that bring to mind?
A
Protected him.
psalm. Keep me, keep me.
military.
Hide me.
In the
shadow.
shelter of your wing.
Mhm. Okay.
If you're talking military sense, a foxhole. You're
A
safe.
foxhole
You're being safe.
or a hidden if I'm holding a dagger and the blade's pointing up my arm, I can hide it in the shadow.
Hmm. Gotcha.
Okay. The word of God.
Yeah, because a lot of times hiding or protecting in the shadow of his wings, in the shadow in his hands, that sort of thing, that's a comforting image, right?
Mhm.
But here, that comforting image makes very little sense combined with the sharpened sword, the polished arrow, concealing in the quiver. This is all very military, very violent imagery. The shadow of the hand thing made me think of a hidden dagger more than a protection or comforting type of thing. So why this military imagery?
The law of the double-edged sword, or the purpose of the double-edged sword, law and gospel.
Sorry, my phone buzzes and my line of work, you have to check your phone when it buzzes.
Well, isn't Israel supposed to be part of when he displays his glory?
What did you say, Ron?
Well, I think you put one and two together, and I mean, he's telling the people, you pay attention, because I can do you great harm if you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Something worth noting about this is the second servant song. I think we're going to take a look at the servant songs of Isaiah, and then we'll move on to the Genesis study. Who are the servant songs about? We talked about this last time.
The sermon?
Servant.
Servant.
Right here, servant song.
Oh, the second servant song.
Mhm.
Lord save the nation.
What was the question again?
Who are the servant songs about?
Jesus.
Yeah. Do you think of Jesus as a sharpened sword, a hidden dagger, a polished arrow?
Yeah, this time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, law and gospel.
I would.
Sure.
the reprimanded the Israelites or the Pharisees many times with a sharp
Yeah,
dispute.
good. You're thinking correctly. I especially like that you said he reprimanded the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the leaders of Israel. This is something I'm pretty sure we've talked about before. Who was Jesus harsh with?
Say it again.
Who was Jesus harsh with?
Yeah,
Well, not even unbelievers.
the leaders of the Israeli nation,
Mhm.
basically the ones that God put in place to keep the faith, and they failed miserably.
Levites.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, what you said covers it exactly. The people who were put in charge of God's people and were blowing it pretty extremely. They were blowing it real bad. And so for them, Jesus was the sharpened sword, the hidden dagger, the polished arrow. But do not interpret verse 1 as talking to them. Look at what it says. Pay attention to me, you coastlands. Listen to me, you coastlands. Pay attention, you faraway peoples. Who's Isaiah addressing there?
Unbelievers,
Unbelievers, more specifically.
Gentiles.
Gentiles, absolutely. And that comes back around in verse 6. The Lord said it's too small a thing that you should just be my servant. I don't know what's going on. My brain has been real weird today.
Sometimes.
We've been noticing that lately.
No, it's just been today.
You think?
To raise up only the tribes of Jacob and to restore the ones I have preserved in Israel. So I will appoint you to be a light for the nations, so that my salvation will be known to the ends of the earth. Well, I don't think I really need to explain how that worked, considering we're not Jewish. Are you Jewish? Un poquito?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Karen? Miranda?
Oh, spiritually, yes. Ethnically, no.
Spiritually, yes. Get out of here.
Not that I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah. What?
We are part of the children of Israel by faith.
I think I know what you mean,
Abraham's
but he's trying to.
Yeah.
Relating to the leaders of the church that weren't following.
Well, not even that. It's just that believers stopped being connected to the family of Israel around the time, right after the time of Jesus' death. It stopped being if you want to say the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, yeah, absolutely. But to claim any part of Israel, that's no longer us. That is the
They're a
group
heathen
of,
nation, right?
what?
They're a heathen nation.
Yeah, they're the group that killed Jesus. People talk about the restoration of the Israelites and things like that. I don't think those people have made it much past Romans chapter 8, because Romans chapter 9 speaks pretty clearly about how the nation of Israel has more or less left God, and even though it kills Paul.
But there will be individuals, though, that will be grafted in.
Of course. The Bible tends to speak in broad generalities. That doesn't mean that any particular person is more lost than anyone else. But in general, the unbelievers will always be enemies of the church, and they will always greatly outnumber the church. In general, the nation of Israel will be counted among those unbelievers. And it breaks my heart because that means Ofer, who I've worked on quite a bit in China. I had an Israeli buddy in China who I worked on a lot. Never landed.
Devil has a hold on them.
What are you thinking, Mike? You got a thoughtful look on your face.
Well, I can understand the turmoil, almost turmoil when you're trying to work with an individual like that.
Well, that was just a huge part of my time in China, working very closely with people who you got to enjoy, that you got to really love, and realizing at the same time that unless God works a massive miracle in their hearts, they're going to be lost forever. You don't see me smile a lot when I talk about China, do you?
Sad situation, in other words.
It was rough. Oh,
Well, it's
These-
even worse when it's your immediate family, too.
oh yeah. Easiest way to explain China happened to me sometime about 3 or 4 months being into China. I was on an elevated train. They have elevated trains in Wuhan. And since it's an elevated train in China and I happened to get a good look at the tracks, I began thinking to myself, this could very well collapse at some point. And it was rush hour, so I was looking around. I can see probably pretty close to 1,000 people right now. So I assumed my math was correct. Okay, 1,000 people. What do we know about China? We know there are some estimates that claim that there are 100 million Christians in China. That's 7% of the population. Okay, so 7% of 1,000 is 70 people. But of those Christians, how many of them attend the state-approved church where you hear about how God wants you to be a good citizen and not much else? Probably, let's say half attend the state-approved church. Of those, if they believe what the church teaches and nothing else, they don't have faith. But the Bible is still used there, so the possibility of creating faith is there. So let's say of the 35 people on that church, on that train who attend a state-run church, let's be generous and say 25 have saving faith, which leaves the other 35. Let's be extremely generous to them and say that all 35 of those have saving faith. When that train crashes and kills the 1,000 people, 60 of us, at the most generous count, would be going to heaven, which means 940 people would be going straight to hell, which is insanely depressing if you think about it.
I always think of those tsunamis and earthquakes.
Mass judgment events. The work was important and there were things I liked, but my time over there was not happy.
You feel you brought some people to faith while you was there?
Had I left 3 years in, I would have said unequivocally yes.
Would you ask?
I asked him if he felt like through his ministry that he brought
Oh.
some people to faith.
Okay, yeah.
After about my third year, I would have said absolutely. But my fourth year there went real bad. Real bad. And I don't know how many people actually were impacted by what we did over there.
Real bad in what way, can I ask?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Real bad in what way? He said things went real bad.
My first few years in China, I had a Bible study every Monday night. And on those Monday nights, it started to get quite popular. So much so that I had to split it into 2 studies. There were 30 people coming to my house. I would work all day, then from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., I would teach Bible study. I'd cook for these people. Everyone would have a good time. Then, during my third year, one of the women who was attending the Bible study got married, which shouldn't be a big deal, right? People get married. Everyone, you know. You know lots of people who get married, right? It's no big deal. Big deal in China. Because that means her husband and his family now own her. Chinese culture, Confucianism. A woman is to be subservient to the men in her life. You're a Confucian?
I don't live in China, Mike. Confused.
Women must be subservient to the men in their life, and children must be subservient to their parents. So by transference, the wife must be subservient to her husband's parents. Ladies, show of hands, who wants that deal?
Be subservient to your husband's parents.
Yeah.
Well, if they're Christians, it's.
No. Let's. Do you really want Myron's parents to tell you what your schedule is every second of your day?
No.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Well,
I wouldn't
lived with
think-
My mother-in-law, but when we first got married, but she was a Christian woman.
I wouldn't think Myron would want that for you either, to be entirely honest. You get to make your own choices. You get to live your own life to a certain extent, at least. And what that extent is a little different for every couple, but that's, shut up. That's up to you. The way it worked for this woman though, her in-laws really wanted children. So that meant she could go to work, come home, eat supper, then get on her back with her legs open. That was her,
Read machine.
yeah, that was her job.
Hmm.
And that meant she wasn't allowed to come on Mondays. And that meant that her friends she was bringing stopped coming on Mondays. And when people realized that was an option, a lot of people stopped coming. And that Bible study faded. And one of the women who was attending it, her name was Fanny. Wonderful, wonderful woman. Wonderful, wonderful woman. Our second year in China, after our second year in China, we decided we didn't want to come back to America because going back to a place like America when you have no car, and my parents live in the country, Caitlin's parents live in a place with nothing to do. You've seen it. It's no fun. So we decided to stay in China and work, earn some money, keep things going a little bit, right? And that summer, our air conditioner conked out. Now in Wuhan, it's 100 degrees with 100% humidity, the 0% humility, but 100% humidity 3 months out of the year. An air conditioner is kind of a big deal then. Well, Fanny stopped by to say hi. She was over in our apartment one day because she lived in the area. She's like, it's hot in here. Yeah, our air conditioner doesn't work. Well, that's not okay. And she called up a repairman and had our AC fixed that afternoon. It was Valentine's Day. Caitlin loves to write. I mentioned to Fanny that because we had a Mont Blanc fountain pen store in one of the malls in the city. So I was going to go there and get Caitlin this awesome fountain pen, right? She loves to write, and people who love to write love fountain pens. They write as smooth as, they're the smoothest writing things in the world. But after I'd saved up my money, because A Mont Blanc fountain pen is not a cheap thing. The store closed. It was replaced with a Prada. This was a high-end mall. At any rate, so one day at one of our bi-weekly coffee gatherings at the local Starbucks, I looked at my group of friends. Hey, do you guys know where to get a good fountain pen? And I explained what I was doing. Fanny showed up at my door that evening with the fountain pen her husband's company had given her husband to commemorate the transition of Hong Kong from British control to Chinese control. This was a nice pen. And a bottle of Prada perfume for Caitlin. Wonderful woman, good friend, terrific lady. So, does anyone remember when Trump was elected, what the date was? It was November.
Sixth,
It'd
third,
be
fourth.
November 3rd, it's always on November 3rd.
No, it's the second it's the first Tuesday after the first Monday. So it's anywhere from the
I thought it was, I
it's
thought it
a,
was sixth or seventh.
Well,
so if November 1st is a Wednesday, is a Tuesday rather, election day's the 8th. If November 1st is a Sunday, election day's the 3rd. So it's something like that. It's either the 2nd, it's the 2nd through the 8th. Anyway, 2 days before Trump was elected, I'm working. I worked with Fanny. She was a coworker. Walk into my office, I see her sitting at her desk looking real sad. And so I do what I do. Walk over, what you do for any friend that you saw sitting there looking real bummed out. Fanny, what's wrong? What's going on? She said something I never expected to hear in my life. Brian, I'm thinking about killing myself. Huh. So you can imagine what my afternoon was spent doing after that. Me and another fellow I worked with, who was also really close to her, perhaps too close, it turns out. Well, definitely too close, considering they were both married. Spent some time talking to her, trying to talk her out of it. One of my coworkers had overheard what Fanny said to me, and I was supposed to teach with her. She looked at me and said, I'll see you tomorrow. And we finally talked Fanny into at least going home and getting some rest. Well, she ended up back at school later that day. She was found wandering the school, and they put her on leave to get her head right. But in China, having a mental illness is considered a weakness. Myron, if Rachel was sent home, having told some of her coworkers she was suicidal, if Karen was sent home, having told some of her coworkers she was suicidal, where are you the next day?
You're going to be with them to make sure.
Well, absolutely, right?
What's that?
You're going to be with them to make sure that they
No.
don't carry it out.
Right.
Are you sure?
Get that way.
Oh
That's a really long conversation that maybe we don't need to have tonight. But
Anyway, it happened, didn't it?
yeah, her husband went to work the next day. And something happened that day that steeled her resolve, because the next morning, Wednesday morning, in China, you would have known it as Election Day 2016. The results would have just started coming in at this point. But for me, it was Wednesday morning. She got on her bike, rode her bike to school, went up to the 6th floor. Some of her students were already there. She taught on the 6th floor. And she decided to see if gravity worked or not.
Jumped out the window.
Yeah, well, off the balcony, but and gravity still works. Landed right on the sidewalk. Dead. And
No support, or limited support, huh? Other than what you guys do.
there was that the rest of that day I spent at a coffee shop with Caitlin was home pregnant. I called her to bring me a jacket. I wanted the jacket, but I really just wanted her around more. My buddy's wife came in and hung out with us, and that was a tough day. That was Wednesday. We were sitting in that Starbucks drinking coffee, trying to process things when we found out two things at roughly the exact same time. We found out, because we didn't know for 5-6 hours whether or not our friend was alive. We found out she was dead and that Trump was elected within about 30 seconds of each other. So that's why those two things are just completely linked in my head. Was a weird two things to learn at the exact same time. I'll never forget the day Trump was elected, though.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was Wednesday. Friday, we found out Caitlin, who she was 4 months pregnant at the time. And at her first prenatal exam, we found out she had a tumor on one of her ovaries. So we've been monitoring that tumor. Wednesday, my friend died. Friday, we found out that Caitlin's tumor, which had started out about that big, was now this big. And that if we didn't get it cut out of her as soon as possible, both her and the baby would be dead. I had quit smoking. I started again. I started pounding them pretty hard then. But I figure that's the kind of week God created the tobacco plant for.
No.
I afterwards quit again, but that's the kind, you have that kind of week, people don't get to judge you for having a smoke. That's what I'm gonna say that.
I guess it's none of their business anyway.
Yeah, there is that, but yeah. And then after that, getting a Bible study going was difficult. Obviously, Caitlin and Zeke ended up okay. You've met them,
Yeah.
but that was,
Everybody has their trials and
yeah.
God help us through.
Mm. That was the thing. We had an Irish wake for Fanny at one of the local pubs in town. It was owned by a Belgian guy, so they had stuff you'd actually want to have, beer and liquor, stuff like that. So a bunch of us who knew Fanny got together to have a toast, say goodbye, that sort of thing. Well, that broke up around 11 o'clock one night. One of my friends looks at me and says, "Okay, Brian, that's over. Let's talk about you for a minute." Thank you. We stayed out till 3 a.m, just hashing over everything. And eventually I got to the point where I looked at him and said, "You know what? Because Caitlin's surgery was scheduled for that Wednesday, if this all goes sideways and I lose them, I'm going to be a wreck for about 48 hours. I'm going to be absolutely destroyed. And then sometime on Friday, I'm going to be able to pull it back together again." My buddy, Scottish atheist, looks at me and says, How would you possibly be able to do that? I'm going to see them again. They're going to be in heaven. I'll get to meet my child when I get to heaven. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be real sad for a minute there, but I'm going to get past it. And for this man to say this took quite a lot. I don't know how much of it was alcohol, but he looked at, because do you guys know any Scottish people?
Oh, yeah.
They drink the way that old Nebraskan farmers drink coffee. Yeah, more or less. This is the only guy I know who drank whiskey by the pint. Like he would go and order a pint glass of whiskey. Delsey's right here. You missed.
Well, she drinks, she don't drink as much as Rachel does.
Oh, I've heard opposites.
Oh, yeah. Just what I heard.
You know, when I'm preaching a sermon, she's sitting there tapping it empty. Just like, you better wrap this up or this is coming at your head.
Oh, no.
If you would put that little thing in
Yeah,
his pocket,
yeah.
that's where the-
Yep, exact. Why do you think they sit up front?
So I can hear.
Exactly.
I'll make sure I never sit in front of you.
At any rate, yeah, my buddy, he looked at me and said, "That is the most beautiful thing I've heard. That is the closest anyone's ever got me to be a Christian."
Mm.
Did it take hold there? Or is
No.
that not sure? They just don't quite understand the full.
Well, it
meaning of
didn't take hold right then.
That's the thing. I planted a bunch of seeds and it's up to God whether or not they grow. But I didn't see much growing when I was there. And by about the last year and a half, my job in Friends of China is to start bringing people in to build the church. The church we had in Wuhan was bringing their own people in. The Chinese people had taken over what my role should have been. So I'd pretty much discharged my duty. My job was to work myself obsolete there. And I did that. So for about a year and a half, Caitlin and I were just like, we have nothing, because I can't do that job nearly as effectively as a Chinese person can.
There
And
were true Christians in the Chinese that were teaching?
Mm.
Yeah.
oh yeah, we had two pastors there. Both of them were trained by our seminary in
Well,
Hong
then the
Kong.
work probably done some good. I mean, you got them going.
Well, yeah, that ended up being my role by the end, playing advisor to these guys.
Well, like
They-
Pastor Smith going to Vietnam, you know, he helped them.
Mhm.
He didn't do the preaching because he didn't know the language, but the guy that from Kansas City that done the preaching, Pastor,
Interpreted
was-
too, didn't he?
Pastor Smith was his advisor on
Uh-huh.
doctrinal.
Yeah, I did that ended up that was always kind of my role over there because you don't get a lot of trained, experienced pastors in the field over there.
Keep them
Oh,
doctrine
sorry.
sound, in
Yeah.
other words.
Yeah, so, well, they didn't need much help with the doctrine. They knew the doctrine pretty well. Where they struggled was practical application.
Help them with that.
Yeah.
I had a niece that was with Friends of China. Let's see, that was about 3 years ago.
I might have met her then. What's her name?
Brianna.
Brianna Bader? Yeah, I've met her. Don't know her very well. I
Yeah.
doubt, I remember the name more than anything, but,
Yeah, she's married now,
okay.
married a minister.
Well, that's the correct decision. And Myron's over there. What are you, hey.
You don't want to know a farmer or a cowboy.
uh,
Oh, I don't know about that, huh,
Somebody's
Rachel?
got to.
Yeah, really.
Well, some lottery tickets gotta lose.
There's a song about it.
Mamas, don't let your babies grow up with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're Huskers. I mean,
Oh,
No
well.
kidding anymore.
yeah, well, they,
I tell you,
this,
we keep going, we're gonna be just like Wisconsin.
what are you saying? If you, that.
We're going
suc-
downhill.
Success is a circle, and if you get bad enough, it comes around to greatness.
Success is not a circle, it's up or down. Either successful or
Including
not.
football.
Honestly, I don't care about the sport. I just like to wind him up.
Oh, you're winding up. I'm,
You come
I'm
pre-wound?
yeah, pretty much. I'm numb to the world.
Clearly. I didn't know you were Scottish.
No.
Anyway,
I'm Nebraskan.
same thing. Shall we get back to it then?
Okay.
You want an explanation of my time in China? That was a little bit of one.
That's interesting.
Okay, look at verse 7.
Seven.
Yeah. Now, who is the one in verse 7? And one is intentionally not capitalized to differentiate it from Holy One. Holy One is
Devil.
not who.
No. This is what the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, is holy.
Oh, not that, no.
Says to the one deeply despised, to the one who is detested by the nation, to the servant of rulers.
God the Father
God the
is the
Father. Jesus.
capital one,
Mhm.
and the
Jesus?
small or lowercase is Jesus, deeply despised.
I was letting her finish, but yes, you were correct. Yeah, and you are correct as well. You were saying the same thing.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, you,
That's okay.
It just hit me with the, I read.
to the
one
one deeply despised, the one who is detested by the nation. This is a foreshadowing of how Jesus is going to be killed and what that will mean. He's going to be killed. He's going to be smacked down. He's going to be beaten down. But kings will see and stand up. Officials will see and bow down because of the Lord who is faithful, because of the Holy One of Israel who has chosen you. Okay, this next section, 8 and the first half of verse 9, what does that mean for us?
For those that were held by the devil in unbelief, now, show yourself, in other words, repentance, let's say. And through repentance, and then the second part of the verse is what will come about because of it.
The separation of believers and non-believers?
Oh, a little louder, Mike?
No, I didn't have what you said.
The separation, I mean, well, the separation of the believers and non-believers and the reaction of both. Wrong?
No, not wrong. One of the reasons I ask questions vaguely is because it's interesting for me to hear the way you think, because a lot of times you see things I don't. Because we all tend to read through the lens of our own experience, and you guys have experiences I haven't had, like football national championships.
Oh, ain't he sweet?
I'm not always a jerk. 5 of them? How many Super Bowls have the Packers won, though?
They still playing football?
Nebraska isn't.
No, no. You don't have to convince me anymore.
I've seen high school teams.
Well, is it talking about when people are brought to faith?
Yeah, sort of.
That's what I would have gotten out of it.
Yeah, I
I
can.
didn't have any background.
No, especially hanging on verse 9, right? You're hanging on verse 9.
Yeah,
Prisoners in darkness. You think of people in unbelief there.
yeah.
I can see where you are coming from with that, certainly.
Well, in 8, when it says, and I will appoint you to be a covenant for the people. A covenant was something that was promised to Abraham to the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will appoint you to be a covenant for the people to reestablish the land.
Who's you?
Who you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this you is Jesus again, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
All of this is still a servant song. This is all
Oh, okay,
uh,
I get it finally.
talking about what is happening to and through Jesus. This is what the Lord says. In the time of favor, I will answer Jesus. In the day of salvation, I will help Jesus. Remember, God isn't talking to someone who is just his son here. He's also talking to someone who is human, just as frail, just as weak, just as in need of God's help as we are, facing the most dangerous test and task that people have ever faced. I will appoint you to be a covenant, not the Abrahamic covenant, but a new covenant, as we say when there's communion. Take and eat. This is my body, this is my blood given for you, shed for you, as a new covenant to redistribute inheritances that are now deserted. The children of Israel have given up their inheritance, and he's redistributing it to the Gentiles. To say to prisoners, the ones captured by Satan, the ones unbelievers, but to say means that this is still part of Jesus' task. Go forth. To say to those who are in the darkness, come out of the darkness into the light. Show yourself. This is, yeah, all, when you were talking about unbelievers coming to him, yeah, that's part of what's being said here. But when you understand who you is, it becomes a much more vivid picture, doesn't it?
I thought book was supposed to make it easier to understand.
The language is easier, still requires some thinking, Karen.
Yeah, I understand. I was about ready to pick up this King James and see what it said.
Thou. Wilt thou, thee, thou, though, comestest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the word that confused you is a word you use 1,000 times a day.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah.
It's not the fault of the translation, it's the fault of the language. It requires when you're looking to understand anything in the Bible, do not read a passage. A passage can trip you up. A passage can mislead you. If I am looking at a passage, I can make a convincing argument for the existence of aliens based on something Jesus said. Anyone care to guess what that is? I have other sheep who are not of this sheep pen. I must go to them as well.
I've heard people say that to me.
Right. You can make, based on that,
Say that again.
I have other sheep who are not of this sheep
He
pen
said this when though?
as,
After,
no. He said this in John 10 and his good ship. I am the good shepherd. I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep who are not of this sheep pen. I must go to them as well. It all hinges on how do you understand sheep pen. And if you're just looking at the good shepherd portion, you can understand it any of several ways. If you look at the chapters around it, he's talking to Israelites. So the sheep pen he's talking about, the other sheep pen is Gentiles, not aliens. But with that one little section, you can force it to do a lot of things.
I
I'm
think
glad
the
it wasn't
Mormons
aliens,
claimed
because I
that
was gonna
one.
be really lost.
The
themselves.
Mormons do a lot of things. But that's a whole nother study. Do the Jehovah's Witnesses come around and knock on your door much?
They used
That was for a
to.
long
Used
time.
to.
That was always fun.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoyed them.
I did.
I've made a Mormon cry once. I busted out my Greek New Testament and showed him the Greek lexicon, proved that Jesus drank wine. Then asked him if your church lied to you about that. What else are they lying to you about? I've never seen a more defeated Mormon missionary in my life
you'd be ashamed of yourself.
for exposing someone to the truth.
And
Yeah,
making you
I'll
feel
cry
bad.
That's what the law is supposed to do. What are you doing in church, man?
I always keep the catechism out in the shop, and the Jehovah's Witness came around, and they was trying, I just got my catechism out, and I says, here, see these passages?
Oh, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, I got a slightly different tactic. You gotta let them say their spiel first.
Sure,
They're not gonna shut up till they say their spiel.
but then, you know.
But then you tell, probably what you do. I'll listen to you, but you gotta listen to me next.
I got a man.
Oh, yeah. They'll agree because they think they can out-Bible me. Best of luck to you. So you can't have coffee, right? Yeah. Can't have alcohol, right? Yeah. Can't celebrate a birthday, right? Yeah. Okay. What happens if your caffeine-free Diet Pepsi is just regular Diet Pepsi? What happens if your decaf isn't quite so decaf? You've done something wrong then, right? Well, yeah. What do you do about it? You're going to hell. That's not even a doctrine you have. Your doctrine is the unbeliever's souls disappear. Look, if you don't quit smoking, you're going to hell. I don't even have cigarettes. What are you talking about? But watching this guy go from this arrogant to this sputtering, spitting, like I asked a question and his switch flipped so fast.
I think it's Jehovah's Witnesses or was it Mormons? I can't remember. It's been too long ago. But my brother was over in his shop and, you know, that he's pretty quick-witted.
Yeah.
They were starting to give a spiel and he just kind of joked around with them and halfway agreed with it. They gave him a pamphlet. Well, then for some reason, they stopped at my place the same day. Well, I started.
Not knowing that,
Well, I, got into the religious debate with them. Well, they gave me a pamphlet that sounded almost like what we believe, but when you really read it, but the one that they gave him, man, that was
Blatant.
awesome. Huh?
The one they gave him was blatant.
Oh, yeah, just, I mean, way off on left field. So they had two different,
Like,
for whoever they want, they thought that they could turn me by using scripture.
oh,
And Danny, they didn't worry about using scripture.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, he
no,
was.
no, he just let him, he just let him.
I-
I can see Danny
What-
doing that.
One of the things I enjoy about the way the parsonage is situated is you don't necessarily know it's a parsonage. Hey, you guys know, but someone passing by on the street wouldn't necessarily connect my house to the church.
No.
So maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses will stop by.
That's fun.
Hmm?
Just put the fence up there, that way you're separated from us.
So I get to argue. I like that. There is nothing more invigorating to me than a good debate. As
Pastor Wickman, who was in Grand Island, when they came to his door, he said, well, you're welcome to come in, but I'm gonna do the talking.
yeah, you can do that, but I always find they're more receptive if you let them say their spiel first. Because if you let them say their spiel and then you know what they're thinking and how they're approaching it, you can tailor your message very precisely
Well, you're allowed,
to destroy their false notions.
you're allowed their, give them enough rope.
Yeah, hey, I got the petard over here. Let's hoist you.
Ouch.
Oh, I meant you.
I know. Still ouch.
Anyway,
We should have left him in Michigan.
you've said that more than
We
once.
should have left him in Michigan sometimes, I think.
Mm,
No, I don't mean that.
nah.
That words count, did you know that?
Only when you're using numbers. She said words count. I said only when you use numbers.
No.
We're thankful you're here, Brian.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. And, someone's got to keep them in line, right? I take a little bit of the burden off of you.
Oh, you have a lot of pride in yourself, don't you?
No, it's not.
Overconfident.
It's not boasting if it's just a fact. Uh,
Fine.
Anyway, let's take a look at the second half of verse 9 through verse 12 there. This peaceful imagery in there is a very striking contrast to especially verse 2. Why do you suppose that contrast is there?
Verse 2, you said?
Mm. That's the one with all the military imagery in
The
it.
law.
Well, gospel.
Well, one is hidden and the other is show yourself.
Hmm. Is there a difference between someone who is an unbeliever and someone who is an unbeliever in the church?
Yeah.
Well,
Why?
You know, An
Let-
unbeliever outside of the church does not know Jesus Christ and the forgiveness of sins that comes through it. An unbeliever in the church knows it
Yeah.
and has disdain for it, where the other unbeliever may not have disdain for it, just doesn't know.
So are you saying ignorance versus plan, stubbornness? I mean.
Yeah. As we talked,
I didn't hear what you said.
Are you saying like ignorance versus known, rejection of of God? You know, ignorance of not even knowing God
Yeah,
versus knowing God, but still failing to believe.
yeah, don't believe it, disdain for it.
So rejecting him.
And you're staying in the church for maybe,
Social
Financial
reasons.
For,
Financial or whatever
financial,
reasons.
that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, there definitely is a difference because in the first half of, now verse 9 is split into two parts in our Bible. It's not split into two parts in Hebrew. So the prisoners who go forth, those who are in darkness, show yourselves. They're the ones grazing beside the road. They've been called out of the darkness. Their unbelief has been forgiven, and they rejoice in the promise of the gospel. However, in verse 2, what you said earlier was very adroit. It was well said. It was Jesus was the hidden dagger, the sharpened sword, the polished arrow for the ones who would intentionally misuse the word of God. There's two different ways to deal with people in their various states of unbelief. The ones who don't know better, you deal with kindly and with respect. The ones who ought to know better, you beat upside the head with the Bible. And that's the way Jesus handled it, and that's what Isaiah is indicating here as well. Okay, it is nearly 8 o'clock. We can cover the second half of this next week, or we can keep going. It is your decision.
Let's go next week for my book.
It's up to you. Have you already got
Yeah.
it studied out for us? Or?
Well, I've
either
already
way.
got it planned out, but I can add some. Nope, next week we are not having study.
That's right.
Maybe we better keep at it or we'll forget what we're.
I'll remember. Steel trap.
Yeah, then we can read over it
Yeah,
again.
we're gonna have
right
Advent
here.
service next week.
Yeah, Advent service next week, Wednesday at 6:30. You're in the habit of coming here anyway, so
For the Bibles.
they give that to him.
$40.
Well, I got my check.
Oh, Alex, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. You said that to me?
Oh, no, I said give the check to Myron, not me.
We just put it into
Yeah, the general, the bill's getting paid out of the general fund, so the check's going in the general fund. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Hope you learned something. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
I learned I didn't want to go to China.